All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. We're on Gamechangers Live live from Miami, Florida. And we have special guests on with us live from California, Mr. Dave Ferrera. Welcome, Dave.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
All right. Awesome. Well, listen, Dave is an engineer, an entrepreneur, inventor, and advisor with more than 25 years experience in the medical device field, successfully developing products, founding companies, and managing them from concept to commercialization. So he's currently the general partner at Quantum Fund. And QFOC is a venture studio that designs, develops, and commercializes medical devices in the interventional radiology markets. So he was formerly a chief technology officer of Balt, which is dedicated to advancing therapies in hemorrhagic.
Hemorrhagic.
All right, you're gonna have to help me out on some of these here. So David co-founded Blockade Medical in 2011 and was their president and CEO. Blockade was acquired by Balt Extrusion of France in August 2016, and Balt designs, manufactures, and distributes interventional neuro radiology devices such as catheters, stents, and coils that are essential in treating such conditions as hemorrhagic and ischemic stroke. So prior to co-founding Blockade, he was the co-founder and vice president of product development and clinical research and general manager of MindFrame Inc. of Irvine, California. And he formed and managed a team that successfully developed the company's first acute stroke mechanical thrombectomy product line.
Very good.
There you go. And MindFrame was acquired by Covidien Neurovascular, which is now Medtronic Neurovascular in 2012. And finally, Dave is an author with a book coming out in December through Forbes called Innovation in Translation. So Dave, it's great to have you on, man. You have a tremendous history and tremendous career in the medical device space. Tell me a little bit how you got into this first off.
So I'm an engineer. I graduated from University of Lowell, which is a town north of Boston in Massachusetts, with a degree in plastics engineering. So I came from a small town in Central Mass that was somewhat of the plastics industry leader in the world with injection molding and extrusion. And my family was in that. And that's why I went to Lowell. And my father was just thinking, hey, this is going to be a future, whether you work in automotive or some type of market, it's going to be great. Probably my senior year of college, my grandfather had an ischemic stroke, and back in the 80s there wasn't a treatment for any of that. You would see people in nursing homes that were paralyzed or just non-responsive, but they survived. I went to see my grandfather, and the neurologist there asked me what I was studying. I'm sure my father had told him what I was studying, and he said, hey, I have nothing here to treat patients like your grandfather. Maybe you could, take what you're learning and go and develop something with a physician, and then we have, something to treat patients like this. And took that to heart. Upon graduation, I went to work for a company called USCI. It was a division of a bigger company called Bard. They were north of Boston, and they were developing angioplasty catheters. Those are balloon catheters that they would use to inflate in arteries in the heart to move the plaque against the wall. Before angioplasty catheters, the only therapy would be coronary artery bypass, where they would take veins from your leg and bypass it across your heart. And this was a crazy procedure developed by some cardiologist or some cardiothoracic surgeon in Argentina who went to the Cleveland Clinic. But then someone thought, hey, if we can put a balloon, inflate the artery, maybe that provides more blood flow. So anyway, I worked for that company. I wasn't making the catheters. I was doing molding, making hubs for the catheters. I then left, went to a small startup in Arizona. Then I came back to Boston, worked for Boston Scientific. That's when I'd met one of their chief scientists. It was a Chinese guy, Jim Wong, and he said, stroke's going to be the future. We've got to develop therapies to treat stroke. And as you had mentioned, there's two types of stroke. There's a hemorrhagic stroke and there's an ischemic stroke. If you can imagine, the arteries in your body are like plumbing for your house. Okay, yeah. A hemorrhagic stroke is like a burst pipe. And an ischemic stroke is like hair in your drain. It has a clog.
Yeah.
So you got to fix the burst pipe. That's a ruptured aneurysm or a ruptured AVM. And you can treat that with embolizing using either coils or some other device. hair inside the drain, or a clogged pipe. That's ischemic stroke. You can treat that by aspirating out or actually pulling it out with like a stent. So I get into those markets eventually, but the inspiration was my grandfather having a stroke when I was in college back in the 80s.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, what was that like when he said, "Well, we don't have anything. You want to go invent something?" It's like, yeah, sure. Let me go back to my garage and see if I can put something together.
Well, I'm looking at my grandfather, and I didn't know what he was going through, but he's raising his arm in the air, asking for God to heal him. And I'm like, he can speak. Why is he so confused? And he's like, well, and he was explaining something. I wasn't really listening. I'm like, how am I going to fix that?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years and years later when I went to MindFrame with the two other co-founders, we realized, hey, what the circuitry inside the vascular system is and how it functions. And what my grandfather had was he had an occlusion of his right middle cerebral artery, and the right side of your brain, the vascular system, controls the left side motor skills.
Right.
And the right side also controls reasoning. So he was completely confused. He could move his right arm. He couldn't actually move the left side of his body. The left side of the brain, the left middle cerebral artery, controls speech and also the right motor skills. So had he had that left middle cerebral artery, he wouldn't have been able to talk. He'd be paralyzed on his right side, but he would completely know what was going on. So it's almost like it's better he was confused and didn't know, but he ended up passing away 2 weeks later. And that was the week of my sister's wedding. So
oh my God.
We had the wedding. We went up to the hospital, took photos with him, and he looked totally confused. Like, who are these people? Why am I in these pictures? He probably even know what a camera was at the time, but he ended up passing away. That converted to a hemorrhagic stroke, and he ended up passing away. But yeah, I had no idea what he was even referring to. How am I going to help you?
Yeah.
Help him.
Yeah.
But now I work with physicians on a regular basis, and I'm pretty much focused in the neurovascular space, but that also goes into cardiovascular and peripheral vascular. So I'm like a plumber. I work with plumbers.
Very sophisticated plumber.
Right. So I'm making the roto-rooter devices for the physicians to use, or I'm making other types of catheters or products for them to use to treat patients.
And so innovation obviously is something that every company is striving to embed and to develop within their people. You have obviously have that engineering mind, right? And you were around a lot of very bright people, obviously in Boston Scientific and all these companies. What was the key factor? What makes these companies so successful in terms of innovation? What's the secret sauce that they have that others maybe lack?
I think early on, the bigger companies, and more so today, the startups, they're the first ones to say, hey, we can do it better. We can create a solution for the problem that the physician is having. And the physician is really the innovator. The physician is the one every day seeing the problem. They're trying to innovate a solution for a problem that they have. Most of them aren't engineers. They're very smart, but they can't design a catheter, design a device. So they begin to talk to guys like us who are engineers and say, hey, I have this problem. How can we fix it or come up with a solution? We as engineers, we innovate the manufacturing, maybe the design process, but that real innovation happens when there's a problem occurring, and the physicians see the problem on a daily basis. And some of them aren't so big. Some of them are huge. Some of them, the technology just isn't available yet. Maybe the right material's not there, the right process to manufacture it's not there. That's where the engineers got to innovate and come up with that material or that process. But the innovation occurs in the lab. Like, someone that invents the smartphone, the user, well, why can't this phone do this?
Right.
They're having a problem. So then they went and they innovated, or they went to Steve Jobs and said, hey, make me this. Right.
Yep.
So the user is originally, I think, is normally the one that begins the innovation process.
But I think, and also, to your point, people need to be open to innovating, right? Like open to coming up with, there's got to be a better way. Let me start thinking about this, because we tend to say, oh, well, that's it. It's not going to get any better than this. I'm not going to think about that. It's not going to be me. So you're always, you gotta have that constant curiosity, right? Like, is there a better way to do this?
You've got to be curious. You just said it. You've got to be thinking, okay, this worked, but there's got to be other issues. So and I get a lot of the ideas or the thought that there's more to solve by attending conferences, society meetings, and physicians are on the podium presenting on a problem they had, or they're presenting on a series of cases that were performed. And maybe 99% of everything went really well, but they had an issue here. It was on a catheter or a stent or some device or something relating to the imaging. And I'll go talk to those physicians after the presentation, or I'll meet them for a cup of coffee and say, hey, I heard your presentation. Is this really a problem? How big is it? And then you can start to ask other people and build consensus. But that curiosity of trying to make a better product, provide a better service, and then hey, I've been through this several times. I know the problem can be overcome.
Right.
And maybe physicians who are just day to day, they're in the trenches, they're like, hey, this is the way it's always going to be. I just have to deal with it. And not all the time. You can come up with a better way of doing it, which makes the procedure easier to do, which makes it safer. And then you can treat more patients safely, and maybe you can teach other people how to do this as well.
Excellent, man. Excellent. Yeah, I always thought, there needs to be a mindset of, starting off with the premise that there is a better way. I'm just not seeing it yet.
Always.
It's always, it's got to be there. So you've worked with companies from, small to big. You've grown them up, not only doing the engineering, the technical aspect, but you've also then been involved with the business side of it, right? Like, actually funding it. And so a lot of engineers are either engineers or and then business people are business people. But here you're crossing both boundaries here, right? Like both sides. How has that been?
Yeah, it was a challenge early on, and it's still a challenge. Raising money is always tough. Actually being older, it's a little easier, but it's still a challenge. Even today during the pandemic, it's hard to meet people and convey to them that we have a big problem that needs to be solved, and this is our solution. I learned a lot about how to pitch or tell a story to potential investors from people that I've worked with. I mean, I was at Micros late in the 90s, and I went from there to Microvention, and I met a great team there. Bob Rosenbluth, Brian Cox, Rich Capetta, Mike Klein. They taught me how business is really a team sport, and people who want to invest, they invest in people. They don't chase technology or chase markets. You have to have a problem with the technology, and you have to have a growing market, or else, okay, why would you invest in that? But somebody has to do the work. The team has to do the work. So, and I played sports growing up. I knew how valuable teams are. I played baseball and ice hockey, and there's 9 people on a baseball field for a reason. There's 6 people on an ice rink for a reason. It's not easy playing shorthanded in ice hockey. I've seen it in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. Okay. So raising money, you have to have a team, and you have to have some success. But if you have a team that's worked for a large multinational, okay, then maybe you haven't done a startup before, but at least you have a team that can create the solution for that initial problem. And then after Microvention, I went to work with MindFrame. I met George Wallace and Andy Craig. They were serial entrepreneurs at several other startups. And then you just learn the value of that story, what goes into the story, because it isn't pixie dust. You actually have to have something behind it, and it's success. And sometimes it's failure that you've had, and then how you learn from that failure to succeed. I mean, most entrepreneurs, we fail a lot. Well, I think all of us have failed quite a bit. You don't make the same mistake over and over again, but back to how is it to raise the money, become a business person? You have to go through a lot of peaks and valleys. You got to go through successes and failures. You got to be able to build a team and work with the team. Guys like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, they weren't overnight successes. I mean, they've had to work at it. And it's the same thing in any industry. Even giving podcasts. I'm sure your first podcast might have felt a little unusual, and now you're an expert, right? And you keep refining. And
That's
that's
right.
what I'm doing now. As I get older, I add more to the team. We get more experienced. We meet more physicians. We're getting a broader array of ideas that we know are in our wheelhouse. So now we can kind of sharpen the knife and pick ideas that we know we can bring to market and be successful with, and then make investors a nice return.
That's right. That's right. So you're always growing your comfort zone, right? You're kind of keeping positive pressure on that comfort zone, kind of every day make an improvement, every day learn something new, every day.
And
And
it's funny you bring that up. I forget where I read this. It might have been Guy Kawasaki or a book I had read, and I tell this to the engineers I work with now, is that you have that comfort zone, right? And everyone loves to be in the comfort zone. Then you have the learning zone outside of the comfort zone. You got to be constantly challenging yourself and figuring out all these things. Outside the learning zone is what we call the out of control zone, right? And I want to be paralleling my feet, straddling the line of the out of control zone and learning zone. I don't want to be in the comfort zone anymore. That's boring.
Yeah.
I want to be on the outside learning, almost out of control, but continuing to learn. So the comfort zone just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Exactly. And I love that point, because you're constantly, you need to constantly grow. If not, you're shrinking, right? If you're not doing anything, you're actually, losing here.
You'll get passed by somebody else.
Exactly. So we're on live here on Facebook Live, for those of you out there, with Dave Ferrera. He's out in California, partner of the Quantum Fund, and he's got a book coming out now through Forbes that's really teaching engineers and teaching entrepreneurs how to take an idea from its inception and all the way till to the potential of it, growing it into a massive business. So tell me a little bit about that book that you're writing.
Yeah, the idea is hopefully will be a template or a Bible for any entrepreneur or physician that's in the medical device field. I guess it could be applied to anything, but the intent was how do you get that idea to market and actually exit it? And the idea, once you have it, you have to file a patent. Without a patent, anybody can copy it. So you want to be first to market, but you want to have that idea protected. And then the whole process of following, design control, how you design, develop it, do all the regulatory testing. And in parallel with that, you have to build a team of experts that know how to design it, how to assemble it, how to make it, how to do the testing. You do that with your key physicians who had the problem. Then you can refine it. Then you have to get it approved, either through the FDA or in Europe under the CE mark process, or outside of the Western Europe and the USA in Asia, China, Japan. And then once you get it approved, how do you initially market it? So we always do what's called a limited market release. You get feedback on that design. You already know that it's safe, it isn't toxic, it's biocompatible, but how does it function? Mm-hmm. It doesn't always work the same in patients as it does on a silicon model bench. You're pretty close, but some physicians use the products differently. The anatomy inside the brain or the body can be quite different or challenging. So you have to either make the device more robust or there's some feature or benefit. Then once you've commercialized it with a sales team, I have a strategy there to do that. Hopefully you have an exit. So it's a how-to book on how to get the idea, raise the money, build the team, get it approved, commercialize it, and get it acquired, and then hit the reset button and do it again. And then along the way, I tell stories of failures and success that I've had, somewhat of the entrepreneurial lifestyle that I've been able to live. The neurovascular field that I'm in, we have meetings in France, in Asia, all over the US. You get to meet a lot of cool people that do the same things you do. Most of my colleagues and friends are other entrepreneurs, engineers, physicians. And I've been doing neuro now for a quarter century. So I've really met a lot of wonderful people and I love what I do. So I'm never leaving this space. And my kids, they think this is normal, which is good because hopefully I can breed some entrepreneurs and continue the cycle.
That's right. Well, man, there's a lot to learn there. Obviously, if you're, looking down that path, I mean, that's a great book to pick up. When is that coming out?
It's going to be out December, before the end of the year. It's been about 2 years in the writing. It was inspired by a friend of mine who's an investment banker, Oren Klaff. He wrote 2 books, Pitch Anything and Pitch Anything and Flip the Script. The Art of the Start was by Guy Kawasaki. That's what inspired me to leave microvention and actually head to MindFrame. But yeah, I mean, these are books that they have to be inspirational and motivational and show you, hey, this is how I did it, and I've been doing this for a long time. You can do the same thing.
Yeah,
it's just a methodology and a process.
exactly. What's that period, that average period or ideal of from startup to sale?
So if it depends on the class of the device. So a class 3 device in our field is typically a therapeutic device that requires a clinical trial. That could take you anywhere from 3 to 7 years. If you have a class 2 or class 1 device, which are pretty much diagnostic devices for the most case, you could design, develop, get it to market, and have an exit 18 months to 2 years. So, 18 months to 7 years, depending on the type of device, diagnostic or intervention, or diagnostic or therapeutic. And hey, sometimes it's simple enough where you get it to market and it's really fast, and someone just wants it in their sales bag. But
Yeah.
I think you got to prepare. There's no fly-by-night successes here. You got to put in the work.
That's right.
Do the right things. File the patents. Have your financial reviews completed, because most of the diligence that's going to occur once you get the device in the marketplace is it patent protected, and how'd you run your finances? I mean, those are two key things. And yeah, the device has to work. That's assumed. But when they dig deep and do the diligence, okay, can anybody else do this? Yes. Well, then you guys aren't as worth as much as you think you are. And how much debt do you have, or how much money did you spend? So there's so many things that have to be understood. And hey, if you were able to self-finance it, that's fantastic. But if you have investors, you take $1. It's no longer your company; it's your shareholders' company.
That's right.
So those are things you just have to do a certain way, and hopefully you have the right device, you have the IP, and you ran the finances well, and that'll lead to a smoother exit. It doesn't guarantee it, though.
Hey, and you're a dad, right? So it obviously you have a tremendously busy life with the Quantum Fund, which you can talk a little bit about. But I mean, does the lifestyle offer you so much more time with your kids, or is it stealing it away because it's so hectic as well?
Well, I mean, I do have an office that I can go to, but I can work from the house. I can work when I'm traveling, and a lot of vacations that we take, I'm flexible. So I do take phone calls or Zooms. I've always made it a point, whether I was at a startup, at my own company, or someone else's, to coach my kids' sports. I coached my oldest son. He's 26. He played ice hockey, and then he went to college and played hockey. I coached him in mini mites and mites. I coached his little league team. I always like to be a coach or a mentor. And then I have 2 young kids. I got a 7 and 9-year-old now. I do their AYSL soccer, and we play street hockey. I like coaching, and that kind of leads to the book. I think the book's going to lead to me just being more of a coach, and hopefully my kids see this and it gives them a template. Hey, my dad can do this. He's not the smartest guy. I can do this. I mean, your kids never think you're the smartest guy. Like, yeah, that's my dad. Okay.
Yeah. Little do they know, right?
Little do they know.
Exactly. Well, hey, and tell me a little bit about the Quantum Fund, how this came about.
Quantum came about, I think the idea came about several years ago. The team I'm with now, we worked together at MindFrame, at Blockade Medical, and also Balt after the acquisition. And we realized that if we stayed in our lane and did interventional radiology products, then maybe we can do more than one of these at a time. Why do them all in series? And one of our founders is a partner at a contract manufacturing company. So he already had the footprint with a clean room, assemblers, and techs to run these companies in there in parallel. So we said, hey, at some point in the future, we're already getting ideas from physicians that we know are in our lane, and we're filing patents on these. So let's form a new company, and let's run it out of the contract manufacturing company. So enough talking, and we just did it. So I think the idea really hit ground last summer, the summer of 2019, when we met a potential investor on one of the companies. He said, hey, I see 4 of these companies. I want to invest in all of them. I can't pick one. Why don't you just raise a fund, and the fund can invest in all these companies and put them all in your CMO. And we said, yeah, that's a great idea. We kind of thought about that, but if you believe in it, then we should do it. So it took us about a year later, or 9 months later, and that's what we did. And so Quantum, the idea is to get physician-inspired ideas that are in interventional radiology. It could be access, it could be neurovascular, it could be cardiology. We would file patents in the physician's name. We would form a NewCo, a C Corp, or a LLC. We would assign the technology, and then we would seed finance each of the companies with our own money, build the prototypes in our own facility because we have the footprint, we have all the employees there. So versus getting 4 different buildings and 4 different teams, which takes time and actually dilutes the talent pool, we just do it all in that same roof. We get to a certain point where we know the prototypes are going to work. We actually have built them, proved that they do work conceptually. Then we do a Series A financing, and we'll raise the real money, hopefully from the fund, or we can do it in parallel with individual investors. And then it's off to the races. We'll complete the design development. We'll complete the regulatory filings. We'll get the approval. And we're already down the road with one of the companies, which is a neurovascular ischemic stroke technology. But that's going to be our new model, which we're calling a venture studio. It isn't going to be an incubator or an accelerator where we think we have something, but we have to kind of tweak it. We know these ideas, which are coming from physicians, are going to work. So we're kind of able to cherry pick the ones that we know how to do. We know the physicians are going to, will actually already be the champion. In the course of us raising money, we've already pitched this idea to several strategic companies that are in our field, Stryker, J&J, Medtronic. And so they know what we're doing. They know what's coming. So it doesn't make sense for us to fly under the radar. Yeah. We already have IP file. We know the physicians want it. We know we can do it. So we're going to be informing them along the way. And hopefully this is becoming a more efficient model to get the products into the sales bag of the strategics and get them to the customer. That's the physician to get to the patient. So that's our new model. And we just initiated it, and we think we're going to have our first approval in the next 9 months, and we'll keep moving forward.
Dude, Dave, congratulations, my brother. That's a hell of a career, hell of a model you got going on right now. Exciting time in your life. And I think that book is going to do wonders for a lot of people who are looking for that like soup to nuts, step-by-step framework or template to really take a product in the industry out to market. So, brother, thank you for joining us. How could people reach out to you?
Quantum Fund OC has a website, so www.quantumfundoc.com, and my bio and contact information is there along with my other partners. So that's probably the best way to get me, or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right, my brother, thank you so much for being on Game Changers with me, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, dude. Take care, man. 1 second.